Hello, Master Dan Chuang. I'm very happy to see you. Thanks for accepting the interview. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks, Master Arroyo. Thank you for having me. I'm doing great.
Excellent, Master. Do you live in Boston, right?
Yes, I actually live in Cambridge, which is kind of just north of Boston, but essentially it's part of the same public transportation. So, yep, I live in Boston.
Perfect. How is the weather there? Is by this time of the year is cold, I guess.
Yeah, we have about 8 inches of snow on the ground right now. We hit our second snowstorm in a week, but I like it. It's pretty when it comes down, and it's nice to go running outside in the soft snow. So I don't mind it.
Excellent. We are freezing here in Querétaro with 10 or 15 grades. Master, for the people that don't know you, can you give us, please, a little introduction about you and what is your current work?
Sure, yes. On the Taekwondo side, I am currently the head coach of the U.S. National Poomsae Team, and I also am the president of the U.S. National Collegiate Taekwondo Association. So those are kind of my organizational roles as far as what I govern. And then I also serve as the head coach of the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology Taekwondo team. And I also am a director of a regional league called the Eastern Collegiate Taekwondo Conference, which is really, the main league that my university team competes in addition to the national league. I also run a dojang, CW Taekwondo at Boston. It's a nonprofit school that, we've been running since 1999. And out of that school, I operate Poomsae and sparring competition teams that we travel around the world. And we call it T.Bos because it was meant to be a collaboration in the beginning between a lot of Boston area schools, so like Team Boston, kind of that idea. But now it's primarily students from local colleges as well as my dojang. And on the professional side, I have been an engineer for the past 20 years roughly. I'm kind of on a hiatus from that career as I focus on Taekwondo for the past couple years.
Perfect, Master. And this T.Bos team train in the facility of CW Taekwondo or train in another place?
Yes, they train at CW Taekwondo, which is at Boston, which is in Cambridge.
Most of the environment of your students of Boston is of students, college students?
Well, but yeah, Boston is it's known as a college town. I think there are like dozens of colleges in the Boston area. So yes, it's heavily weighted. I wouldn't say it's all college students, but there are many college students around. So typically our competition team will have members from local schools like MIT and Harvard and Tufts University, Boston University, local schools like that.
Perfect, Master. Excellent. And to start with your story, how was your starting point at Taekwondo? How old were you? How was that experience? And a little before, I forget, if you can tell us a little about how was your family? What kind of child were you? And yeah, that early days, how were for you?
Sure. Yeah, I grew up primarily in Northern Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. Both my parents worked for the government in different roles. My father was a researcher at the National Institute of Health, and my mother worked for the Food and Drug Administration. And so, I was very fortunate to, grow up. They're both alive, thankfully, and grateful for all their support. One of the things that I had to do as a kid that I didn't like very much was, I went to a Chinese language school every Sunday. And as a kid, it's not the thing that you wanted to be doing with your Sundays, to go and take a class. But the good part about it was that I got to take a version of Taekwondo called Tangsudo Mudokwan every Sunday for like 2 hours. And I just looked forward to that so much. And I remember it was a very almost like a backyard situation where, we were training in a wrestling gym, very little equipment. I think we kicked cardboard boards, pieces of cardboard for our targets. But I just loved it so much. And, I think my love for Poomsae might have originated there. We didn't spar much in that school, but it was very traditional style training, very strict training. And so I loved that as a kid. And yeah, I think that's how I got started in Taekwondo. I did that for about 6, 7, 8 years. Kind of stopped in high school and picked it up again in college.
Perfect, Master. So your first background was more a traditional Poomsae side.
I would say so. I mean, we definitely did some sparring, but it wasn't, wasn't competition based. And it's interesting. I think when you look at a lot of really high level martial arts, it's amazing how many of them started from traditional settings when you really drill down and ask them, whether it's Poomsae or sparring. Maybe in this modern era there are some pure sport people who only did the sport for the sport, but I would say, how many of us have those traditional values and the traditional work ethic that comes from coming out of that and learning how to accept suffering and harsh criticism and all of that, right? And being able to forge through those difficult times. So I think absolutely, yeah, I think that's true.
And did you also learn Chinese?
I have to say my Mandarin Chinese is not the strongest, so I was not the best student, but I did learn some Chinese through the process too. Yeah.
Perfect, Master. And how did you move from this first introduction to the Tang Soo Do and Mudo Kwan style to start to move to the competition environment?
Yeah, so in college I went to Cornell University. It has a long and storied Taekwondo program there that's very large, and they compete in this Eastern Collegiate Taekwondo Conference, ECTC. The instructor there, Master Han Dan Cho, he's just an extraordinary, inspiring coach. And I started over actually with, basically almost from the beginning, and learned competitive Olympic style Taekwondo from him. And I got very into the sport. I competed, many times each year, and I kind of just built my sparring game up from the bottom up. And there were very, very good national, international level fighters in that group that I could learn from. And and I think he really pushed our team like emotionally and physically to their limits. And I think I learned how to really train hard and learn how to push my limits in the sparring side there. And so I got very into sparring. And when I left college, I had a decision point whether to continue competing or not. And I had a group of friends who in Boston, we we kind of got together. We all moved to Boston at the same time. A number of alumni of the Cornell program moved to Boston at the same time. And so we decided to basically start a competition group and continue to train hard. And we started to go to more international opens. And in the end, I was able to, compete all over the world, which was fun. So
a little back before, again to Cornell University, how was your, which qualities does your master had that made you fell in love of Taekwondo? And how was how did you combine studying engineering with Taekwondo?
Yeah, that's a great question. Master Handan Cho, he just had a way of telling a story every class about what you were doing and what you did. And I think that is creating a narrative around athletes is so important, especially at the collegiate age, because they're searching for their identity. And he had a way, in addition to being an excellent technical coach, he always was very clear on what he wanted. Throw your kick this way, not that way. He was a great technical coach, but I think beyond that, I think his strength particularly was creating a narrative around what each athlete was doing and making it universal. So he could teach a group of 100 people at once, right? And make every single person feel accountable to the workout. And so I think that was important. I just think he was just a master motivator. He really knew how to get into our heads and, maybe find the thing that we wanted most and kind of just poke it a little bit, right? And, it's very personal. It's a very personal relationship. I don't know if he still coaches like that. I probably does, but I think that I've really carried a lot of that philosophy in my coaching. For me, coaching is you have to engage the person as a whole person, right? Otherwise, your longevity will not be there. If they're just there as a contractual thing to get some knowledge from you and move on, then that's not really why I get into it. So I think that was really important. And then I think he just did a great job community building too. And it was a strong community in college. You're looking for a community and you're looking for friends and you're looking for something to really dive into. And it was certainly that, the team was, 150, 200 people at times. So it was big. I was fortunate to be captain of that team, but on my last year there. And and as far as engineering goes, I think when you really love something, you just make time for it. I think that's as far as it goes. And I just basically did what it takes. We were training more or less every day of the week, for varying intensity for an hour, 2 hours, or whatever it was. And then you would just get your work done. And then college, sleep is optional. You have a lot more energy when you're in your 19 and 20 and 21, and when you love it and you're passionate about it and you really care about the people who are involved, then it's not hard to make time for it.
Excellent, Master. After college, so you moved to Boston with some other of your friends.
And so actually, I actually had a 2-year stint in Buffalo, New York before I went to Boston, but we all arrived in Boston kind of around the same time in 1999. So I did coach at a school at the State University at New York at Buffalo for a couple of years too, and I kind of got comfortable teaching classes. But yes, we all arrived at Boston, maybe about 8 or 9 of us in 1998 and 1999.
How you moved from just enjoying to practice the martial art, the sport, and how you started to become a master and instructor?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we all kind of naively just said we really miss Cornell Sport Taekwondo, and we want to basically recreate that environment. It was so special. It was so intense, and so we naively thought that if we could just, teach the same way, that we would be able to recreate that environment. And we kind of did, but we also kind of realized we were a little older and what people were looking for. And we primarily taught adults, in this program. It's very unusual. Usually dojans, are very youth-centric, right? So we were looking for, a community, and we were looking to spread our love for Taekwondo. And honestly, we were looking to pay the rent for our workout time, because we were renting hourly space from dance studios and churches, and it turned out I guess we were pretty good at it, because before we knew it, we had 60, 70, 80 students, and we were making enough money to open our own storefront by 2004.
That was before you opened that dojan, or before you start teaching at the MIT, and how was that? How you started to teach at the MIT?
Yeah, so MIT was a little bit more of a personal project. I co-founded that program with some student leaders. Chinedum Osuji, who was my main training partner, he would go on to go to the Olympics in 2004. Christina Park, who was a multiple-time national team member for US, collegiate national team member, and national team member as well. And then Connor Madigan, who was another student leader there. And we kind of decided to start that club. I applied to teach physical education there in 2000, because that was a great way to just get new students introduced to the martial art and have a constant stream of new students at MIT. And then from there, the 4 of us, we kind of came together to form that club in the fall of 2000. So that was a parallel effort. Again, like when you really love something, there just aren't enough hours in the day. And I was, teaching these classes at CW Taekwondo, teaching these classes at MIT. And, it was just 7 days a week, it felt like I would carry all the pads in my car, and, we open my trunk and there'd be full of just gear, and I'd carry it all on my back, inside. It was just like that, right? Like I didn't care about having, any fancy equipment, but, I just wanted to kind of spread my passion for Taekwondo, and to honestly create communities that were equally special as to what I experienced.
And you did all that while working as an engineer.
That's true. Yes. So I was working full time at that time for a startup company, doing chip design, basically electronic chip design for consumer electronics. And yeah, I mean, I think that if I pursued all engineering with the full passion I did for Taekwondo, might my career have been a little bit different? Maybe, but I still had a very successful career as an engineer. I was managed large programs, managed teams of over 100 people. So it's not like I didn't pursue that seriously either. But yes, it was a lot, and again, when you're that age, I think that you have lots of energy, and when my girlfriend at the time, who became my wife, she was also in Taekwondo, so she understood, and she was at practice, and we kicked and we sparred together, and and so not for that, I don't think that, I think the relationship part of it would have been an impossible third leg if she were not in Taekwondo.
Master, your degree is in mechanical engineering, right?
Oh, electrical engineering.
Electrical. Sorry, I
okay.
got the idea that, and for me it was strange that you were in chip design with a mechanical background, but that happens. Okay, Master. And do you think that your experience to build community in Taekwondo helped you to perform better as an engineer?
Do I think my experience in Taekwondo helped me to perform better as an engineer? Oh, 100%. Yeah, in many respects, I think my strengths as an engineer was actually my communication ability more than anything. And when, I was not a great public speaker, honestly, in college or in high school. I was okay, but, I would get nervous and I would stutter and, I would be a little bit like, sweating and stuff. And, when you teach 5-6 days a week, I'm sure you experience this too at your school. You just kind of become immune to fear of public speaking, and you're improvising every day. And, at the end of every class, I try to speak honestly and openly about what's in my heart and try to bring it back to the workout. And so I think when you can do that day in, day out, that's not an experience that engineers typically have, right? Because they're in the work, they're on their computers. And so I think that I had very strong communication capability. And so as a result, I was a pretty good manager, and I think I was a pretty good communicator of what my team was doing, or helping facilitate communication between different teams underneath me. And so I think that was one of my strengths. And then the other part of it, I think, is just learning how to work under pressure. There were times when I had we had to go 3 weeks nonstop, 20 days in a row, and we were on a site trying to get something to work, and the pressure was very strong, and I felt like I was like, this is easy compared to a tournament day, I'm a little tired, but I'm very used to having that, a lot of pressure from this side, a lot of pressure from this side, people wanting a lot of things from you, and then being able to just say, okay, right? I think it's those intangibles for sure that Taekwondo helped my engineering career.
Perfect, Master. Around those beginnings, you mentioned a friend of you from Trinidad and Tobago.
Correct.
I think he was at the 2004 Olympics, and then you go with him to coach him to the Madrid World Championships.
That's right. Yep. You did your research.
How was that experience, Master?
Oh, that was fun. I mean, we were primary training partners for each other, kicking every day, sweating every day from, 1999 to 2007, so we knew each other's games like the back of our hand, and I think, all of the strong bonding that comes with that. So it was just really special to be able to go, I wasn't going as his coach per se, but I was going as the person who knew his game the best, kind of, right? And because we were training partners. And 2005 World, it was great to be able to be on the floor at 2005 at Madrid. I remember it so clearly, being on the floor. He drew a tough draw. He drew the 2001 World Champion first round and fought a close match, lost by 1 point, but it was a very memorable. I think I remember that was the year that the U.S. had 3 gold medals, all from the Lopez family, and that was very memorable too. And just the intensity of that environment. Oh man, the Spanish fans, they came to play. It wasn't like in the U.S. where it's a convention center and maybe you got some parents. I mean, this was a stadium full of people cheering for Spain. You know what I mean? And they let us know. And so I think that they let the U.S. players know. And so I think just being in that environment was fantastic. To know that the Taekwondo that we worked on, really, we had coaches, the Sunny and June Huang from Westside Taekwondo in New York City kind of helped us out, but training day in, day out was on our own, and we with the exception of some visits to train with them. And so it was good to know that the Taekwondo that we came up with, maybe it wasn't the best Taekwondo in the world, but we knew it was good Taekwondo. And it was just very gratifying to see that, all of our hard work meant that we could stand on that stage and sometimes medal, but go toe to toe with the best players in the world.
Excellent. How have you been a successful coach in the sport part? How have you prepared, aside from the technical Taekwondo, how have you prepared yourself as a coach, considering your background is on engineering and maybe not in sports performance?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of my knowledge was practical knowledge, but then, you go out and you network and you take seminars here and there, and you observe what other coaches are doing. As a coach, you can never think that you have all of the answers, so I think we're always looking, and in the online era, more and more information comes out online. And just reading books and watching online, and then just practical knowledge, right? When you're out there, I think there's no better way to learn the game. It's interesting. I see that, in the beginning, there was probably a lot of and very few coaches, I will say, Taekwondo coaches in the US really do come from a true sports performance background. Usually it's kind of like an adjunct. You have the technical skills coach, and then they often will bring on a separate sports performance person to help with the training or the physical preparation. But there are some exceptions. But I will say that it's interesting to see the progression and the confidence that one builds as a coach. It takes time, and when you look at coaches that are very new to the game, you can almost see the ladder of development that coaches go through. With their confidence in their game, and really the psychology of coaching, I think, is part of it. Knowing your limits. I think when you look at the way that sports have gone, it's become such an individualized thing. Especially at the highest level. It wasn't like that in the early 2000s. Maybe in Taekwondo, it was much more of a train hard and compete a lot. And now it's so professional. You have nutritionists and strength and conditioning, and maybe psychology, and maybe one athlete will take a team of 3, 4, or 5 people to manage, right? So, part-time, of course, but I think I think that things have come a long way there too. My background as an engineer, I think it helps me in a lot of ways, to be honest. I think that, being a technical person in a sports world gives me just a different perspective on things. I feel like I see things more analytically, maybe. So I will, be able to observe things from more physics standpoint, or a more statistical standpoint, than maybe what other coaches would do, who are coming at it from more I was a former competitor, and therefore I will coach in the way that I was trained, or I will coach in the way that as if I were an athlete. So I guess in that regard, it helps to be that, and it also helps to when you do have strong administrative skills that come from that kind of background, then you can help the sport in a number of different ways, and that kind of also becomes a power assist for your coaching, if that makes sense.
Excellent, Master. You mentioned a concept that I liked, that is the psychology of coaching. We hear a lot about the psychology of the athlete, the needs of the athlete in a psychological way. What do you need? What do you think a coach needs to perform better, or what do you mean by this psychology of coaching?
Well, I mean, I don't claim to be the world's best coach, or to speak about this in any definitive way. So I feel kind of uncomfortable saying to be an authority on the psychology of coaching. And I'm not a psychologist, but I can just speak to what I know and what I observe. But I guess I feel in the beginning, we often project ourselves as coaches onto our athletes, right? So we're why isn't the athlete motivated? Why isn't the athlete doing what I'm doing? And and really what you're saying is you're basically saying the athlete should feel what you feel, or should do what you want them to do, without necessarily laying the groundwork to do that, if that makes sense. So I think that establishing trust and rapport with an athlete, and defining a vocabulary with the athlete that you can talk to them in is super important. And then I think also understanding that your job is not to mirror the athlete at competition. You know what I mean? Your job is not to be like them. If they're excited, you shouldn't necessarily be excited, right? You have to create the right environment for them. So you have to kind of understand them, and then if they're an athlete who needs to be amped up, then you amp them up, right? If they're an athlete that gets really nervous, then you just create this silent bubble around them, and you put them in the corner and say, go listen to your headphones. And then you try to shield them from all the schedule changes, and you just tell them, you go now, right? And then when they don't do well, I think I think a good coach will always take it on themselves, right? Like you don't tell the athlete that, but you're like, well, what did I screw up this time? Like, how can I do better? Because the temptation is, you often hear coaches like, oh, if they had just listened to me and blah, 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 they did it again. And like, dude, man, like, you can't be saying that stuff. It's, I have a feeling that, who prepared them? It's you, so you have to kind of accept that, and then, always be willing to go back to the drawing board and be humble. And, I'm constantly humbled by sport, like you may have a success one year and the sport is both Poomsae and sparring. They're moving so fast and your knowledge is out of date like that. Bam. And so if you're not in the stream of it and you're not really focusing on it, then you have to take responsibility for that. Like, hey, what I did last year is not working this year. What do I have to change? What trends did I miss? How can I get ahead of the curve? So, I mean, that's part of it. And then, the psychology of, also being at a competition, at a big event, whether it's a big championship or a local event or an international open, like you cope with those things in different ways, right? The psychology of it. Like you have to be prepared for the organizers to always change. It never fails. They will change something, right? At the last minute, you show up and like, oh, what's black is white, what's white is black, red is now blue, points are worth this now. By the way, you should do your blocks this way. It's always something like that. And then how do you deal with that? If you're frustrated, then your athlete's going to be frustrated, right? So you have to learn how to accept these changes and be the one to deal with them the best, right? Every hardship is an opportunity because it's a chance for you to deal with it better than your other coaches, right? So I think, projecting that positivity onto your athletes and creating a positive environment, and then creating sustainability in your athletes too, right? Like teaching them the way to how to cope with failure, and then leading by example there too, right? You can't always point fingers, and you have to like create the trust so that when you do hit that first big roadblock, are they going to point fingers at you? Are they going to point fingers at them? Are they going to keep their head down and just what comes next there? So I think about that stuff a lot more almost now than I think about the technical stuff, because I feel like the technical stuff is all just different shades of the same thing almost now. Like, okay, this year the emphasis is here, but the fundamental principles, I don't know if they fundamentally change that much either in Poomsae or sparring. Like, okay, this year cover is more important, or the Hogu scoring is a little different, but it's still distance and timing. It's still rhythm for sparring. And then in Poomsae, it's still, we're always improving our technique. But, I don't think that, I think much more about the psychology of competition than I do about the technical side of it, if that makes sense. Because, the technical stuff is it's almost like expected now that they're, what you're working on.
Perfect, Master. Related to this, you work with students of a very famous and I guess demanding university like the MIT. How do you motivate your students to focus in their careers, but also to train Taekwondo? Because many ones can say, oh no, it's my career is very demanding, I will drop out. And I would also like to know how would you I think it's a coaching ability. How do you decide or split which students are just they just train for the fun for the club, and which students you see in them that they can compete more and you push them more? How do you make that decision?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think that like I said, I went to a Cornell, which was also a very competitive university. MIT is also really competitive. And when I first started the club, I think some of the student leaders were like, I don't know, MIT kids are so intense and they're so focused on their school. I don't know if they're really truly gonna want to commit this much time. But I think young adults are young adults, and I think, every age group has their motivation, right? If and psychologists talk about this too, right? What motivates a 5-year-old is different than a 7-year-old, is different than a teenager, is different than a young adult. And I think the adults kind of in that 18 to 22-year-old, I think they're looking for a lot of things, but I think one of the things they really are looking for is a place to belong and also to find themselves in. Do you know what I mean? And I think that is true regardless of whether they go to an elite university or not, to find who they are and to find, where they can push themselves to their full limits. And, you know, I think that I try to give them that opportunity to push their boundaries. And I think what better way to push their boundaries than to take something that they're actually not that good at to start. And I hear that over and over again from them. Like, I learned to be good at something that I wasn't good at, you know, and you know, not all of them, very few of them go on to become international level competitors, but I have produced national Poomsae team members from the MIT Club, and you know, and very high level sparring athletes as well. But you know, how do I choose who to focus on? I don't really choose. I let them choose, you know, honestly for themselves, because they'll put the time in if they want to. So I kind of have a baseline, you know, 3 workouts per week that they can go to, and then I have additional sparring and Poomsae workouts. I let them self select. I say, if you go to this, you really have to be committed. I'm not messing around. I will hold you accountable, you know, for these special workouts. And so it becomes kind of a privilege for them to attend these, you know, T.Bos workouts at CW Taekwondo, and they get to mingle kind of with some of these other competitors who are competing at the Opens, and they kind of pick it up, you know what I mean, by being around them if they're interested in doing it. In addition to, of course, getting access to, you know, a little slightly more intense training. And then, you know, competitive opportunities. This Eastern Collegiate Taekwondo Conference, they're competing 5 times a year. So maybe they're doing in this league, and then a 6th time at National Collegiate Taekwondo Championships. So that's 6 legitimate competitions. And, you know, they might, if they're doing well, they might get, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 matches per tournament. So say they're competing 20, 25 matches a year in sparring, or they're getting out on the mat, you know, 5, 6 times a year in Poomsae, they're bound to get better through that process too. And, you know, I think it's like anything, if you decide you love it, you get really into it. And then, you know, at MIT, you're looking for your tribe, you're looking for people that are your friends, you know, and I think the foundation of all of my programs is creating a tight community first before I even think about trying to pursue excellence. Because, you know, if you just go in there saying, I'm only going to teach the best, right, then you're going to have like one athlete, right? And you won't know who the best is anyways. If you're just looking for athletic people, then, you know, I mean, that might work in a high performance center where you can, you know, you basically put them on the track and they're full-time athletes. But for students, you know, I really just try to promote a community that is super inclusive. It doesn't matter. I don't care if you're really athletic or not athletic, but if you're willing to put in the time, then, you know, let's go. You know, let's see how far you can push it.
Excellent, Master. How can we build a community in a club?
Well, I only know what works for me. And, you know, like I said, I teach primarily adults, so I can speak to, you know, both the college aged adult community as well as the kind of you know, maybe call it the 20 to 50-year-old community, which is kind of, or 60-year-old community, which is kind of the other community I teach. And I think they're slightly different. I think for colleges, I think, you know, I think you have to just really promote social activities. You have to give them a constant stream of things that are on the horizon. So students work on a deadline mentality, right? So they think, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? If you don't dangle a deadline in front of them within the next 2 weeks, it's out of their mind. So you kind of create this ladder, and within those deadlines, you create opportunities for them to depend on each other, right? And say, okay, well, you're on a team sparring together, you're doing this project together, you're mentoring each other, you're a big sib, little sib to each other, and you just create these little formal things that eventually cohesively knit into a whole. And you know, and then I think you look for glue people, like people who are good leaders, and then you empower them. Because, you know, as a coach, you know, I'm too old now, I cannot be their friend, right? So I have to find those student leaders who are really good at you know, facilitating those contexts, and then you empower them and say, go, you know, do that. And then I think the rest is just, you know, youthful energy. I think, and then creating a common purpose, I think, is the last part for the colleges. So trying to win that end of the year championship in our regional league, try to win that end of the year championship for the national title, you know, which my team has been fortunate to do both over the years, and then really celebrate that as a team effort and not as the effort of individuals. And so teaching that team mentality first, I think, is really important at the college age. And I think at the you know, I think when you leave college, you know, for those people who want that path, and then you go into the professional world, I think it is a big jolt for a lot of people. So young professionals, say in their 20s, 30s, or, you know, kind of and maybe you know, parents too, you're searching, you know, it's a different, the ability to forge genuine connections to other people, it's very difficult. So I think for that age group, you're just finding a way to lower those barriers, and give people a place where they feel welcome and loved and trust, and be able to achieve trust with the people around them, and be their authentic selves. I think that's a really hard thing to do. And so I hear that over and over again from that age group. So I'm always pushing these ideas of listening and empathy and, challenging yourself and personal accountability, but especially, wrapping that around, pursuing personal excellence, in that group, I think is really important, but also within the context of a community. And then, creating a inclusive community where, you're not like trying to force someone into a particular mold, but you're just letting people be themselves, and whatever that may be. I call it like free love. You give people free love, and they kind of stick around. And so I think, I've been able to, so far at least, to keep that community around, running for like 20 years now, and keep those values alive.
Do you how many classes in the day do you teach of Taekwondo?
I actually don't teach that many currently. Right now I teach, but during normal times I might teach maybe at most 1 to 2 classes a day. Okay. 1 to 2 classes a day, and the rest I deputize to my instructors. But I will say I don't know how dojang owners teach 4 or 5 days, 4 or 5 classes a day. Like, and my classes are longer. They're like at 1.5 hours or 2 hours, depending, right? During normal times. But I'm exhausted. I really pour like 100% emotional intensity into any given workout. So teaching even 2 in a row is exhausting for me, and that's just the way that I teach. Maybe I could be more efficient, but like I said, I think a lot about the psychology and managing the psychology of every individual at the workout, and that requires, and constantly projecting energy outwards, right? I try to be like an energy beacon during workouts. So I think that is very tiring for me. Maybe there are certainly coaches who do it other ways. They have whistles, or they keep things very regimented, and they have their schedule and they stick to the schedule. And but that's not how I coach.
You've been college national team in sparring. What have you learned from it, Master?
For the as a coach, yes, I've coached sparring at the 2008 World University Taekwondo Championships, 2010 World University Taekwondo Championships, and 2014, and also at the World University Games in 2009 and 2015. But yeah, I mean, it's like any other competition. Honestly, I don't know that it was super different in that sense. I think getting that big games experience is important. Getting out there where you're used to cameras being on you, and you're going down the field and you're seeing top tier players, all of the world medalists, to your left and to your right, and you're kind of like, oh, okay, like this is a real competition, and how do you cope with that? And yeah, I can't say that I treat it super different otherwise, other than the psychology that I talked about earlier of world games, and it's a more of a national team environment. So like, how you deal with the athletes and keep their mentality strong throughout the competition. I will say that is one of the big challenges of a college age group, is keeping them focused during the week. They're traveling and they're excited and they're with people they don't get to see very often, and so like keeping them on task. I'm sure that with men and women staying together, that's always a challenge too, to keep everyone focused in that regard too. So I think all of those things are true. I'm particularly proud to have coached some of my personal athletes at those events. Jason Grant at the Universiade, and Amy Mallet at the World University Taekwondo Championships, and Carissa Fu at both of those events too, both World University Taekwondo Championships and World University Games. So just getting to step out on the stage and have my Taekwondo out there as well is great. Yeah, and I think having that feeling of progressing round after round at a big international event too is also good experience. And walking in the opening ceremonies of those big games. Some of them are just wonderfully produced, and that is a really special feeling to be representing your country. And seeing all the other countries, all the other sports. A multi-sport event is special, right? Because you're staying in the village and you're seeing athletes. That person's really skinny and like and got really springy legs. Oh, they're probably a high jumper, and that person's like 7 feet tall. They're either volleyball or basketball. That feeling is pretty special too. To be able to experience that, and so I feel very lucky to be able to participate in these events and to be able to contribute to athletes' performances. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, perfect, man. How did you become a national team coach? First sparring, then Poomsae.
So on the sparring side, the NCTA president at the time, Master Rex Hatfield, who was just a super important figure in collegiate taekwondo in the United States. He was secretary general for like 20 years, and then president for 4 years. He really, saw my potential. He saw that, that my group had sent someone to the Olympics, and that, we had been bringing a lot of athletes to a very high international level, producing international medals at the World University Games and other things like that. And so he kind of gave me the opportunity to be on that team. The first year, I coached. I was fortunate to coach some good athletes and coach athletes to medals at my very first World University Taekwondo Championships. And then I think he continued to appoint me for the next 3-4 years until the position turned over. So I think that was primarily how I got involved in that. On the Poomsae side, it's interesting. So I had a couple of athletes who were interested. I didn't know anything about competition Poomsae in 2009. It had been there for 3 years, and I was a sparring guy, and I love Poomsae. I love teaching Poomsae, but I didn't know this, the standards yet. And so my athletes, Bobby Ren and Lisa Joe, they were kind of they really pushed this idea for me, and they competed at the 2009 World University Games, the very first time Poomsae was contested there. And they kind of helped me understand the rules, and, and I helped them the best I could. I wasn't necessarily too knowledgeable back then. And then I had another athlete, Renee Chen, who suddenly, she made the national team in 2011 and, and started medaling at Opens. And so I said, well, I should do this too. And then I tried out for the national Poomsae team in 2011. I made it. So I went to Russia and competed at Vladivostok. And I was like, well, I didn't do as well as I hoped, because I just don't know that much about this yet, but I'm an athlete, I bet I can figure this out. And so and I had athletes, more and more athletes getting interested in it. And we were training harder and harder, sending people to these games and still not making a big impact, to be honest, because, I don't think we had the knowledge yet. And so I went to Korea a couple of times, once in 2012. I visited Sang-jae Lee's a very famous coach, in Korea. And then also in 2013, we went to like 3 or 4 universities, Youngin and Hanchedae, the KNSU. And then I picked a lot of that stuff up. A lot of new training ideas, and then I incorporated them into what I knew already about, sports training. And then I started to have some success. And then in 2014, I was named head coach of the team. I applied for it. 2013, I was a coach for the first time. And then in 2014, I guess I was well regarded enough that people thought it was a good position for me. So Bruce Harris at the time was the CEO of USA Taekwondo, appointed me as the head coach.
So, Master, you started 2009 with no experience in the sports side of Poomsae, and you prepare yourself learning a lot, because it's related to my first question, with from other masters. You go to train to Korea, go to train to wherever you can,
yes,
in order to
yes.
improve.
Yes. I think that's so important. I really had to humble myself. I was so used to being knowledgeable, right? Like as a sparring coach, I had done a lot of things at that point. And as an athlete, I was okay. I was pretty good as a sparring athlete too. And I had to humble myself, to be honest. It was very like, it took a little bit of like, but I recognized that if I needed to teach my athletes, I had to get this knowledge somehow. And I have to laugh, like when I first went to Sang-jae Lee's school, Dongwon Lee Taekwondo in Korea, like, he was very, very good about posting on social media. I think he was like the first social media guy who was like saying, hey, this is what sport Poomsae is in Korea. And so I think he invited a lot of people to train with him. And I think he was very important in spread that early era of spreading the knowledge. And so I visited him with a couple of my athletes, and it was just funny. Like I had like 14-year-olds holding targets for me, his high school team basically, and they just looked at me and shook their heads. They're like, no, that's not right. And I was like, oh, okay. I was biding my time. Like, look, do you know, like, but I honestly, I could not do a lot of the drills. I trained 6 hours a day, for that week, and my body was very tired and sore. And I was in my late 30s, and I was pretty sore. Like my body couldn't do what these high schoolers were doing. But I did learn a lot. And I don't know if they fully appreciated how much I was learning during that period. And like I said, physics is physics, the body is the body, and like once you kind of understand and you have the idea, then you could kind of build, right? And so I won't say that like I still do all those drills in the same way. I doubt he does either, but and then I went from seminar to seminar and school to school, and wherever I could, I would just ask questions. And I think there was another seminar with Grandmaster On, where same thing, like he would walk around, he'd just look at my low block and he'd go like, no, to shake his head, like just this look of disgust on his face. And I was like, yes, sir, and like he was trying to teach a concept of whole body engagement. And it's a subtle concept, that it was challenging for me. Like I felt like, the hard style of Poomsae was kind of my style at the time. And I didn't understand this idea of relaxation and using your whole body. And, I was there for like 3 hours of him just shaking his head at me. Right. And at the end of it, like I kind of got it like once. I was like, oh, he's like, oh, that's pretty good. And the next week in practice, it like clicked for me. And the funny thing, my student was there and he would look at her. He's like, oh, she's good. But you, oh, you're no good. Right. So, I mean, I think that I say this to laugh because I think that you do have to humble yourself constantly in this sport. There's always someone who has something to give you. I do think I know a thing or two now. I think that I have my own personal ideas of what Poomsae is. It's not just a derivative of other people's. Like I have taken all this stuff, assembled it, and now I have my own internal model of what Poomsae is. And I'm really in love with it now. I think that it's wonderful. I think that it bridges to sparring much more than people think. I think that's important too. And then I think that, body mechanics are body mechanics. And, I think it's taught me so much about my body and what correct technique is and how to do Taekwondo, both sparring and Poomsae into older age, because I'm using more correct mechanics now, right? And I'm not trying to muscle the techniques and not trying to force my body to do things.
Excellent, Master. Great stories. And now, how do you see Poomsae nowadays? Do you like it? What do you think will be the future of Poomsae? It's growing a lot. The athletes are evolving a lot. What do you think we can expect in the future?
Yeah, man, Poomsae has changed so much in the past 10 years. And I saw that, I look at that and I see 10 years ago, like we didn't even really have common knowledge across most countries on how to do correct kicking or technique, and we were all just, trying to figure it out. And now, like, I think most countries, have pretty good technique, and it just comes down to execution and training and, trying to stay like a little bit ahead of the person next to you, right? Like, it's not like big differences. I think for certainly the advent of freestyle and the increasing footprint of freestyle, that looks like a direction World Taekwondo is going. But I think they've tried multiple times to kind of put recognized Poomsae, like the traditional Poomsae in the background. And I think that every time that they try to do that, there's a lot of pushback. I don't think that we're going to get rid of traditional Poomsae. And I hope not, because I think that that's the foundation of what we do, and it's accessible, and it's something that every athlete can do right around the world. It's what ties our sport together, honestly, internationally. And I don't know if people fully appreciate that, and it ties our martial art together. I shouldn't even say sport, together as Poomsae. So I hope they don't remove that completely from competition. I think that, like when they brought out the Bigak Poomsae, for example, and that kind of has faded to the background, at least for now. And freestyle, it looked like everything was going to go freestyle. And then they kind of dialed that back a little bit. So I think there is, a constant conversation happening between the World Taekwondo and the Poomsae community. I don't know how much I'm part of that. I do make my my requests, about here and there, and I'll write them, but I don't know if they listen, but I'm sure other people do too. I think another aspect that we're seeing is, the inclusion of the higher age groups, like 70 is starting to happen, 70 plus is starting to happen. I think that's super important. Poomsae is something that we can make a lifelong practice of, and those athletes in those senior and master divisions are incredible athletes, and for them to be doing what they're doing is just so impressive, and the level picks up a little more each year. So I think celebrating athletes at all divisions is also something that I see and that I hope will continue. I absolutely believe that there will be a continued movement to include Poomsae in the multi-sport games. Pan Am Games was the first time, I was fortunate enough to go and coach at that event, the Pan Am Games, in Peru, in Lima, and it was just great to see Poomsae celebrated in that way. I thought the level of competition was very high, and I hope that that trend continues. Ultimately, do I think Poomsae will make it into the Olympics? I don't know. Maybe. I think it's come up several times in competition. It looks like right now, if I am understanding that they are maybe gearing more towards including team sparring potentially in the future as an additional medal sport. So maybe we will be included, but maybe team sparring will come first. But I as far as the IOC level, I'm not really too exposed to what it takes to get more medals for our sport included in the Olympics. So I think that the politics of that and the negotiation for that, I think, is really what will determine whether or not there is space for Poomsae at the Olympics.
In order to not moving only to freestyle, do you think do you like this idea, for example, of last university games of performing both freestyle and recognized Poomsae for the medals, or do you don't like that format?
So yeah, that was actually that format was the brainchild of my predecessor at the National Collegiate Taekwondo Association, Dr. Russell Ahn. So he is the FISU technical delegate. So I actually helped him draft that. Like, I typed out the words and I proposed that with him. I think it was the best. It's the best compromise for that format, because if we cannot introduce more medals, this is a great way. But we want to raise the profile of our sport. I think freestyle is necessary for not necessary, but I think freestyle is important, for us to celebrate those aspects of our sport in a way that the public can get excited about. I think as much as I do appreciate our traditional martial arts, I don't know how accessible it is for people to see, 50 choreos in one day. But freestyle, they can see 50 routines and be like, oh, okay, just like figure skating or whatever it is. So I do think that it's good that they included both, and I thought that was the best compromise. I think it was a very smart thing that Dr. Ahn did to include both of those formats. For me, I do think that I don't know if our sport is ready 100% to go there, but maybe this will help push it there. Most of my athletes are, good at one or the other. It's rare for someone to be good at both. But again, maybe that's a case where my knowledge just has to catch up yet again, to where things are going. So maybe I have some learning to do.
Excellent, Master. And what do you think of the rule set right now of Poomsae freestyle and sparring? If you want to talk us about something you think could improve in the Taekwondo rules now.
Mm-hmm. For Poomsae, I think that I think the rules are good, overall. I think that I think there is a difference right now between what countries score regionally, or like there's a style kind of that different continents have. So, maybe there's an Asian style and there's a European style and there's American style or Pan American style. I guess sometimes that can be frustrating as a coach. So maybe it would be great to lay out to create better education resources for referees so that there's more of a consensus on, what a correct power is or what correct rhythm is. And, I do see some of these international referee seminars, and they're good. Those masters are really, really love Poomsae and they have a really deep knowledge, but I think it's hard for referees to absorb that information in just one seminar, especially if the referees are not necessarily deep Poomsae practitioners themselves. Maybe they're experienced judges, but I think there's only certain knowledge only comes from, really a deep practice. And so I guess I don't know that that's a rule change, but I think I would like to see more referees with that kind of deep knowledge of Poomsae, right? Rather than just the surface. I will stick to this rule because I know that if their eyes flick up at this one time, I'm going to hammer them with a major deduction. I think that kind of gotcha judging I think it's good to have standards, but I also think that it's the wrong direction for our sport. It should be more in the direction of correct movement, correct athleticism, and then those things should be like, okay, like, yes, accuracy is important, but I don't think it should be such a dominant aspect of our sport and, so capricious like that. So that's, not a criticism, but it's just, and I understand that our sport is evolving. And of course, if the referees tell me I have to do something, I will do it. If they tell me I have to express, point my left pinky out when I do guarding block, we'll do it. It's fine. I don't mind doing whatever they ask me to do. But, at the same time, I'm trying to maintain correct fundamental movement. And I think that's the most important thing. And then on sparring, I think, there's all this new school versus old school debate, and I grew up sparring, I don't know if you did too, in the old, pre-electronic chest protector era. And then I straddled that. And I think there were many good things about moving to the new era. I think as a coach, like, my job got so much easier when we went to electronic body protector, right? Because I didn't have to, celebrate every point. I didn't have to like manage the referees and the judges. I didn't have to do performance or wave my arms constantly, like physically engaged. Like, it was almost like I had to be like an actor, right? Like every single match. And like, I have to like constantly be jawing at the referee and like being like, did you see that? Hey, what? Hey, no, they'll score the next one. This whole, like, it was like a constant patter. And then with electronics, suddenly, like, I could just be like completely tactical, be like, nope, not that one. Yeah, that one. Okay, right. And I could talk to my player instead of actually talking to the judges the whole time. I don't know if that makes sense. And so I think the objectivity of it was such a huge blessing. And then I think, also certain things like, punishing going out of bounds and forcing the athletes to engage a little more, I think, and decreasing the size of the ring maybe a little bit. Those were all great things. But and I also think that, so I really credit the inventors of the electronic body protectors for that. I think it's really, really good. But I do think that players are just too smart. Coaches are too smart, and no protectors is perfect. And so I think we're at the point where like everyone has just put all their collective brain power into like how to manage the hogu more than actually fighting, right? And I think that doesn't mean that I don't think players are fighting. They are fighting, and these are awesome athletes. And under any rules, I think that these athletes will excel, right? I don't mean to take anything, and I coach athletes, at opens all the time, and I'm not saying that anything about the athletes, but I think as far as the rules go, I think that if I would love to see a new generation of the electronic body protector come out. As an engineer, I would just love to see that. It's been a while since it was updated. I'm sure they are working on it. I'm hoping that these new generation will have less weirdness, about them, like the grazes and the scrapes, and then the other thing I think is, I think that we have to accept. I think we all thought that our sport has to be objective, and I actually think that we have to accept that our sport is subjective. And I think unless we accept that, our sport will never go back to what we want it to be, and we have to accept that there are going to be bad decisions. We have to accept that there are going to be cases where it didn't go anywhere near like what we hoped. If we want our sport to look a certain way, we have to just agree that we'll have to just decide that's what our sport is, and then we'll have to hold people to it subjectively, and I think otherwise, then I think we'll continue to go down this road of increasingly non-functional techniques, that are very effective, non-functional in a combat sense, but very functional in a Taekwondo sense.
Thank you, Master. Related to the first part, to the Poomsae part, I've heard of these style differences between America, Europe, and Asia. Wow. What are those differences? Because
I can't give you all my secrets. Videos. No, I'm kidding.
I don't.
No. I think it's pretty. I think it's changing. First of all, like what was true 5 years ago is not true now, and I think people are very much. I think somehow the Asian style is becoming a little more dominant. In particular, the Korean style is becoming a little bit more dominant across the board. But as a general rule, I would say like the Pan American style tends to emphasize more power, right? And then the European style tends to be more clean and powerful, whereas the Pan American style may be more powerful and high kicking. And then the Asian style is more about rhythm and relaxation, particularly the Korean style. And it's a different kind of power. I won't say it's not powerful, but it's just a different kind of power. Now I think that's changing. When I look at the European Championships, and and some of those players look very Korean to my eyes, like in terms of their style now. But not all of them. And I think that there's just a certain, like, the way, I think rhythm has been the biggest pickup for me this year. That watching World Online Poomsae Championships, it's interesting when they went to the live round. Suddenly, I thought rhythm became much more important, and players that were very strong and powerful, but maybe their rhythm was a little like stop, stop, stop. Like some players just didn't do as well when you would have expected them to have done much better based on past world championships. So I guess I'm seeing a movement towards a little bit more rhythm-based Poomsae, and more of telling a story with the Poomsae and relaxing a lot, right? Especially on video, where if you push the power doesn't show, and you just look a little messier, right? And so this video style actually has moved, I think, the center of our Poomsae over here. Whether it stays that way when it comes back in live, I'm very curious. I don't know, but yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, perfect, Master. How does USA Poomsae works? How do you? It's a very big country. How do you work together and try to keep your standards high, being such many people and different places?
Yeah, USA, I'm national Poomsae team coach, but what I do is probably very different than what other national Poomsae team coaches do, right? Because, I'm not, I don't live at the National Training Center. I don't, we don't really have a resident program, or we don't bring people together for like a month at a time. It's not like that. So I think I think there are plans to begin that. We do have a national training center that is used for sparring now, and I am working with the executive director, Steve McNally, to talk about some of those programs coming online in the next year. But I would say that the strength of USA Taekwondo, and USA has done well. I would say, like, we had the most medals at World Championships, and we maybe surprisingly did well in the junior and cadet divisions. I think we took 3 out of the 4 gold medals. But I think those were very much I think athletes working with their coaches locally at their dojongs, and then I do my best to resource them. And of course, I'm training my own athletes to make the team too. And then I'm doing my best to resource them, make sure that they have what they need, the information that they need, bring them together. When we come together, then we do train, and then we try to shore up whatever their weaknesses are, in those times, and try to give them what they need, and especially provide that game day support. I think like I said, it's a big underestimated aspect of it. Having an experienced coach there who knows how to navigate the big games or navigate those world championships, that's important, right? Because you can get caught up in the in the situation. But as far as how we select our team, we currently have a pathways. So we have a national team roster. This is very new for us. So we have in order to get onto the roster, you have to either win a major. So we have 4 majors a year. It's US Open, US Nationals, Grand Slam, and then the top ranking points, USA Taekwondo ranking points. And then any G2 rated event can also be considered a major. And then if you win 3 majors, then you automatically get the spot, unless there's someone else who won 3 majors and you're on the spot. Otherwise, there is essentially a fight off, at every event to see whoever is on the roster who's within the past 12 months has won one of those things. Then you compete for the spot. So it's kind of a complex thing. It's new for us because, I think we want to encourage people to compete more and to get out there rather than just, training for one event a year to make a team trials. And but it's still fair in the sense that, maybe you don't like the judging at this event. Well, you go win another event. I think that is a really good way to keep people motivated and not kind of locked in. Every year we would train so hard for the team trials, and then the judging would kind of turn left, and we'd be like, what? I didn't expect that. And then you get very frustrated. And I think actually this new system is better in that, you can kind of integrate your experiences over the course of a year and then prove that you're the best by winning a lot, right? And I think maybe that is the way it should be.
Great. I find it great. I like it more than just one event, one big event during the year, because in one event can happen many things. And
exactly, you could be injured. Yeah, you could be injured, or you didn't like the referees in that one ring and they judge kind of weird or whatever it is, right? And so Yeah, so I mean, I think USA Taekwondo, we're trying to draw from the strength of many coaches, right? There are many good coaches in the country. I know I'm a good coach, but I'm not the only good coach. There's many other coaches. Some of them might be better than me, So I think, I have no problem saying that. But I do think that what I bring is a good, fair administration of the team and fair opportunities for athletes. And when athletes feel that it's fair, then they will compete hard, right? So I think that's important.
And these major tournaments are influenced by your like for tennis.
Yeah, I saw that you noticed that I like tennis. Not really, I think tennis is just one of those sports I just like. I don't know. I think there's a lot of fun commonalities between Poomsae and tennis that I didn't realize until I got good at Poomsae. But relaxing and not trying to muscle the ball and hitting through. But I'm just a club level tennis player. I'm not a not a nationally ranked player or anything like that. I just play for fun. Yeah.
Excellent, Master. Aside from tennis, do you have any other hobby?
I'm a dad. I have a 4-year-old son. I absolutely love spending time with him. I think that's my primary other hobby right now. Yeah, I mean, I like to read. I like watching a lot of different kinds of movies and historical movies or movies from a long time ago and movies from different directors. I like reading a lot about the psychology of learning and listening to podcasts about psychology of just social psychology. Podcasts are a big thing for me too. So yeah, those are some of the things I've been interested in lately.
Excellent, Master. Do you teach Taekwondo to your child, or you are letting him live?
Oh well, yeah. We've tried to get him interested a couple of times, but when it's your kid, you can't push it too hard. So I'm kind of waiting for him to want to do it. Yeah.
Perfect, Master. And as a tennis club player, which player of these three big figures that we are privileged to see right now, Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, which one do you prefer, and which one do you think is better?
Oh, two different questions. Oh man, aren't we lucky to have like these amazing players? I mean, how long have they been dominant? It's crazy, right? They're playing into their late 30s, and isn't it interesting that? And you see it in American football too. Like this, Tom Brady just won the Super Bowl. People are performing at a higher level later and later in their lives, and I have to really, like maybe like athletes would have retired in their late 30s, and because of injury or this or that. And we just understand more, I think, about how to take care of the body and how to have correct mechanics and how to live a healthy lifestyle. So I just will say that I appreciate all three of them for that. And I think there are aspects I really appreciate about all of them. I think Djokovic is just like persistence and his endurance, and he has such a strong all around game. And Nadal, you just see like his effort on every. You can't help but like just be pumped up watching. We're like, oh my gosh, this guy, he's flexing this huge bicep, and he's like, and vamos, and like, wow, and if he loses, it's not for lack of effort, right? It's just he's going to give 150% on the court every single point. But I think I really have to admire the technical excellence and the efficiency of Federer. I think that's as someone who just as a fan, I have to. You never know, like he can produce crazy shots from any part on the court, but it never, and he just, as a spectator, you're just always watching angles on the court, like where's the open court, and he always can manage to surprise you, like by the decisions he makes, time and time again. It's not a predictable game, and because he has such a strong abilities, like he can do those things, without necessarily being the tallest or the most muscular player out there, so I appreciate that he's technical in that way.
Excellent, Master. And talking about your like for movies, which directors do you like?
Oh, well, I'm super impressed by the Parasite director. I'm blanking on his name right now, but the Korean director, I think he's done some really impressive work. The one who won the Academy Award, and I think it's interesting. He came out of a tradition that when you hear him talk, he's kind of like maybe my age, maybe a little younger, and he grew up with the same directors that I did, watching Spielberg and like and a lot of these '80s blockbusters, which is kind of like golden age of the blockbuster, I would say, which is, movies that are produced in a certain way with, kind of a magical quality where, the music is a certain style and the camera is always moving and it creates a very childlike excitement. And because I was a child during that period, I think that era, that Spielberg Lucas era is definitely imprinted on me. I definitely also appreciate a lot of the classic Japanese movies like the Kurosawa. I think Seven Samurai. You watch that movie, it's 4 hours long, and like you're never bored for a split second because like he's just directing your eye here or there with the camera work and the direct line of sight of the actors and just constantly cueing you to different things. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I have a specific director that pops out for me for the past 10 years. Honestly, the past 10 years I have had less time to dedicate just being a parent and with the national team coaching stuff. But yeah, I think I just appreciate directors who are doing interesting things with the story and plot, and and that are taking something that is familiar but then subverting it a little bit. Like really appreciate Christopher Nolan's movies too, like Inception and Tenet, and these things they're trying to challenge you a little bit while also being tremendously entertaining. Like they're not saying that that has to be a boring to be challenging, but their movie can be enjoyed on many levels. And I think that good movies are like that. You can enjoy them just like, this is a great spectacle, but you can also enjoy them like, oh wow, what were they really trying to say? What was Stanley Kubrick really trying to say with Full Metal Jacket or whatever it was with there's all these symbols layered throughout the people pick apart years later after he dies, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, I appreciate movies for that reason.
Great, Master. What are your middle term next goals? Do you have any specific project you want to share with us?
Well, like I said, at the national team level, I am trying, we're trying hard to launch athlete development pipeline. So that will mean talent ID, potentially in the youth and cadet divisions, and then trying to support those athletes more substantially, trying to get them more regularly to the Center for Excellence in Colorado Springs, where they can train together, trying to create more international training opportunities too, where we have exchanges. Honestly, a big barrier has just been funding for our team. And, it's challenging because, we're not an Olympic sport, so it's not necessarily always 100% the priority, but I think that's changing under the current administration. They are looking to both generate more competitive opportunities and training opportunities, as well as, put more money towards those athletes. So I'm excited for that, to see where that goes. And, when we can create an opportunity where an athlete can relieve some of that financial pressure and they can focus on training for a good, 5 to 10 year chunk of their lives, what can we really produce with that? Right now it's all kind of on the side of their school or on the side of this, but if we do start getting some more dedicated athletes who can willing to put aside other things in their lives for a time, what can that produce? And then, and then increasing the pipeline, having more athletes who are skilled, just having a larger body of athletes and trying to bring them under the national umbrella and not just attached to like one coach. I think that will be a big step forward. And on the collegiate level, I really want to restructure our college Taekwondo. College is an interesting time. It could be a great source of talent development, I think, because not everyone wants to stop their school for Taekwondo, and it could be a great way to provide competitive opportunities for sparring and Poomsae athletes. And there's the World University Games, of course, something to shoot for, but also to develop regional leagues that are giving them 5, 6, 7 times to compete per year. They need that, and if not, then they're just going to be, then you have to kind of go the open circuit and spend a lot of money for for maybe not as much competitive opportunity as a result. So I'm trying to, as a U.S. National Collegiate Taekwondo Association president, to try to grow those programs. It's tough because schools don't really assign that much. It's typically a club sport at universities, and so it's hard to convince schools to put a lot of resources towards Taekwondo. So really, it comes down to developing good leaders and then letting them kind of create a ground up movement. And that's kind of how I'm looking at that. And then on my dojang side, we're trying to grow that school a little bit too. And right now we have about 300 students, I think. But I'm trying to maybe increase the competition footprint of it a little bit, and maybe give more competitive training opportunities to those athletes, and think about how I can support those athletes financially too. And we're a nonprofit, so we do some fundraising, and I'm hoping that I can do better to support my own athletes, during a time of their lives when they need it.
Amazing, Master. You mentioned also that you like reading. Is there a book that you've given most as a gift? If not, can you tell us about 1 to 3 books that most impacted your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think one book that I have given as a gift, and I think the most important book I've read this decade for me personally was Grit by Angela Lee Duckworth. Grit. So it talks about basically there's been a transformation in the U.S. at least. I don't know how it is internationally, to promote an education concept called growth mindset. I don't know if you've heard growth mindset. And it's basically it was a complete turnaround for me. It was like a huge light bulb went off for me. And basically the basic concept is that essentially talent matters a little bit, but persistence and hard work matters much more. And, that sounds like such a cliche, but they back it up with science, right? There's actual studies and research. They researched West Point cadets, and they did things like, what was your academic performance, like, and what was your personal leadership skills and all this stuff. But they found that in the end, it was really just their ability to grit their teeth and get through it, right? That's not exactly the right definition of grit, but their ability to persist through challenges over and over and over again that really mattered the most. And that in the end, like this talent ID stuff, I'm trying to identify people based on like how high they can jump at first or how fast they're. Yes, those are important things, but the dominant factor really was this ability to work hard and then take failures and then cycle them back in a positive positive way. And the other book I think that Grit references is called Mindset, I think, by Carol Zweig, is a famous psychologist, and she talks a lot about this too. That when you succeed, do you take the success as the metric? Like, did I succeed? Great, check. That's not the right way to look at it. You're like, why did I succeed? What things did I do? Was that a good win or was that just an okay win? Like, did the things I try worked? And you're constantly just making these little adjustments, and you're not focused on the result at all, but you're just focused on the process of improving. And these are things that coaches say all the time, and athletes are like, yeah, but I want to win, right? Like, and I guess the thing that really hit it for me was how much science was behind it. Reading Angela Lee Duckworth's book, and she just cites example and study after study after study, and how much people's psychology matters on whether they'll persist. There's a famous study where that she's not her own research. She talks about other people's research too. But one thing example they gave is the psychology of what you do is important in that, like, it can affect your performance just with equal skills. So they gave famously a math test, to someone, and in one case they told them, hey, the person who designed this test has this birthday, and they didn't tell them, but it happened to be the same birthday as the person, and the person and the other group, they didn't tell them that. I might be mangling the story a little bit, but just the fact that you had some connection to this person, like, oh well, I could, and they found that statistically they scored much higher on the test, things like that, right? I think that that's not
you, Master.
Sorry.
Yeah, ready.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean that may not be the right example of growth mindset, but I think that this Angela Lee Duckworth book, The Grit, was the one I've given the most, and it really transformed how I approached my athletes. And I became instead of like a tough love coach, which is kind of what I was before in terms of like pushing people, holding them accountable every workout, which I still do. I think I became much more of a, what is the next step for you as an individual coach, right? Like, okay, you got this, what's next for you? You got this, what's next? And I felt like, although I think it makes for a much more enjoyable coaching process, because you're not grading yourself constantly on whether you won one competition or not, but you're grading yourself on whether or not like the one adjustment that you did worked or not. And if it worked, great. If it didn't work, then move on to the next adjustment. And I think it's a much more pleasurable way to operate as an athlete and a coach. But I do think that you do need a winning mindset I think that also I think it's a like a paradox. You know, you can't just be growth mindset, or then you get too caught up in just like practice mode, right? And so you do need to have a killer instinct sometimes. And I'm still figuring that out, I guess. But I think on the whole, though, it has been such a good thing for me and for my athletes to approach things that way. And I see it they even talk about it at my son's school now. Like he's like 5 and there, you know, or 6 or whatever. And I walk down his hallways. There's like growth mindset. It means that you don't focus on the results or something like that. Like they have that stuff on the wall now. And I'm like, oh, wow, you know, like this has really made it into modern education theory. So, you know, I have given that book out a few times because usually people get stuck like, why am I not winning? You know, why are they winning and I'm not winning? You know, and or you know, why is that child doing better than my child, right? Or that kind of thing. And you can't get caught up in that kind of mentality. So I think that has been the most important book I've read this decade.
Excellent, Master. Great recommendation. Is there a recent purchase, maybe from the last year to now, for less than $100 that has most positively impacted your life?
Yeah, I don't know about that one. I don't know that there's anything. You know, I have to say what I really appreciated during the pandemic is wearing comfortable pants every day. So, you know, we don't go out anymore. I'm not wearing jeans. So I bought a really comfortable pair of sweatpants that I enjoy wearing every day. So not very profound, but it's definitely true.
Synthetic or cotton?
It's I don't know what it is. I think it's maybe some of both. Yeah,
Okay.
cotton. It's a cotton poly blend. Yeah, it's very soft.
Do you have any specific failure, maybe a favorite one that set you up for later success?
I think I mentioned that already, but you know, when I was on that national team, U.S. national team, we sent a full team to Russia, and you know, we had I think maybe like 20 divisions, and we did not get a single medal at that World Championships. And so I think that was a little bit of a like a moment. You know, I think that was like the toughest performance we ever had, and that was like the national team I was on. We had a lot of 5th places, but you know, just no medals. And so I think that was kind of the thing that made me go out and say, well, it looks like I really got to go out and get some knowledge. And so that's why I started pursuing some of these opportunities to go abroad or to go to seminars in the US. And and again, growth mindset, right? Like I had to basically say, what is it that I can do a little better? I know that I'm pretty good, but I know that I could do better. So what are the things that I can address, rather than like, we didn't get any medals, which people did kind of say. And then I think not to credit the team success just to me. There are a lot of great coaches who produced a lot of world medals out of that. But in 2014, 3 years later, I did coach an athlete to the Carissa Fu got a bronze medal in 18 to 30 individual female, which is the first medal US ever got in that division. That was almost unimaginable that we would get a medal in that division. In 2000, in the previous years. So I think that was a nice turnaround.
Excellent, Master. What do you consider you are not good for?
Not good for? What am I not good for? I really don't enjoy running very much as a sport. I think there's something about it, like I have a difficult time getting my head to disengage from the discomfort. So I am not a particularly great runner in that regard, mainly not because I think I can't be good at it, because I think I just don't enjoy it. So, which is my problem, I guess. But interestingly, along those lines, I started a challenge this month where I'm forcing myself to run outside for 30 minutes every day in February. So 28 days in a row, I'm going to run, and I'll let you know at the end if I learn to love running.
I think it's common for many Taekwondo people.
We like to hit things. We don't like to run.
If you could have a gigantic billboard that anybody in the world could see, which message would you put on in a message for the whole world?
Oh, that's a heavy question. Yeah, I mean, I without sounding too cliched, I mean, I would say something like love and listen and learn, right? I think that right now it's really difficult for people to listen to each other in the United States right now. And, you know, it's interesting. Taekwondo is one of the wonderful things that cuts across everything, right? It cuts across political boundaries. It cuts across international boundaries. I have friends that I would never have met if not for Taekwondo, right? And I think one of the interesting things, you know, I'm a Facebook generation person, so I'm on Facebook every day. It's how, you know, it's just how we communicate. And I like to see the conversations that happen, not like within one group, but like across the political divides, where two friends will talk to each other and to see how they interact. And it's when you have the mutual respect from Taekwondo, like you can see how you can have a real conversation about like, oh, well, I really disagree with you, friend, but you know, here's why. But at the end of the day, we can walk away friends, right? I think that's and that. So I guess that loving part comes from sharing something like Taekwondo, and then the listening part comes from giving yourself space to listen because you have that love for each other, right? And then that gives you the opportunity to learn from each other too. And you know, you may not ever agree with that person, but you at least can appreciate that they have thought about something as hard as you have, rather than just immediately assigning them stupid or, you know, bigoted or this or that, right? It's very hard right now because of, you know, the nature of social media maybe, or so I, you know, I think about the state of things right now a lot. You know, we all do right now in the United States. It's a heavy time politically, and it's a heavy time in terms of our identity as Americans. So you know, I think, you know, and I'm very grateful that I do a sport that kind of promotes those values of respect for each other by and large. So I think that is, you know, something that I count my blessings for.
Excellent, Master. What advice could you give to a 23-year-old that has just ended college?
Yeah, a 23-year-old that's just ended college. I think that's a really important time for students. So I think a couple of things. One is, you know, definitely get your finances straight, because the decisions you make now are super impactful later in your life. You know, whether that's investing it for retirement or, you know, I think the decisions you make now are you know, if just a little bit of sacrifice now can go a long way. And that's advice someone gave me, and I'm so grateful they did, because, you know, I think it made a big difference for me to really live a little poorer, you know, in the beginning, and try not to, you know, the first time you have a job, for example, you know, like really try to still live like a poor student as long as you can. I think a second thing is, you know, recognize that your support system is going away, right? So maybe like you were at a university and you had someone giving you food every day, and maybe you had someone, you know, making food for you every day. Maybe you had someone, people telling you what to do, setting deadlines, and suddenly you don't have that. So recognize that 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 will need to be filled with something. So you need to plan at an equivalent level to what you were doing then, right? Maybe if they were making the plans for you, you have to make those plans now. No one's going to make that plans for you. And then I think a third thing would be to recognize that, like, you have to look out for your interests. You know, like people are not going to look out for your interests anymore. In school, it's assumed that people are looking out for your interests. Not completely true, but you know, by and large, it is. And so I think it's important in professional settings, especially, like, you know, advocate for yourself. Know that, you know, that you have to understand the big picture. And then I think the fourth thing is understand what other people's needs are. You know, I think that's a big thing people lack at that age. They're really focused on themselves, you know, and what's in it for them. And recognize that, you know, the best way to get to propel yourself forward is to understand other people's needs, you know, first, and then understand how you can contribute to those, right? Because if you don't understand what other people needs, then you're just going to be uh, kind of just appear to be selfish, or appear to be not very emotionally intelligent in the situation. So I think all of those are really important things that on that boundary between being a college student and not a college student. And that's for athletes, non-collegiate athletes. You know, I would say you don't have to stop competition at all. You know, like when you finish college, I think that's a thing of a lot of people think. You know, look at all these people competing into their 30s and 40s. You know, whether that's Poomsae or sparring. If you love it, do it. You know, and you know, I think there are certain people who are very public out there about their love, and they keep competing, you know, into their 30s and 40s, whether it's these Masters games or whatever. I think it's wonderful. You know, no reason. I would compete myself if I were not coaching. I tried to do both, and I just found it challenging for me. Some people can do it, but I could not do it yet. Maybe I will go back to it. But I think that you don't have to stop competition, if you are committed to it and you're willing to make the sacrifices in your life to do it.
Perfect, Master. What do you do when you feel overwhelmed or unfocused? What do you do to be on your way again?
Oh yeah, that happens a lot, especially around like the start of the year or right when big championships hit. Like I get up in the morning and like I feel like my brain is racing about the 16 things I have to do, and I almost can't start, right? And so for me, I have just a very, very simple method is I just open a document and I just start typing the things I need to do, and I make a list, and I check the things off the list, and when I check them off, I feel a little better about myself. And it's a very simple thing. I know that there are more complex ways to manage your time, but that is my method currently. And then I also try. I'm very lucky, fortunate to have my very, very supportive wife, Kathy. So I talk things through with her. She's super smart, much smarter than I am, and she always kind of brings me back down to earth. She's always willing to speak the truth to me, like, hey, Dan, this is not really did you really think that this was going to work? I'll be like, maybe not. Okay, I'll go back and think about this one a little harder. And so but I think just taking a moment to decompress, and then I think the other thing is absolutely getting your workout in, whatever that workout is. If you cannot break a hard sweat for 30 to 60 minutes in a day regularly, then you're going to have problems. So I think that's the other half of it, and that lets your brain just unclench for 1 minute, and then you can do what you need to do.
Perfect, Master. Thank you very much. I don't know if you want to add something I didn't ask you and you want to share with us.
No, I think that was great. This is such a great opportunity. Thanks for your great conversation partner. I really, I've never done a proper podcast before, so I appreciate the opportunity. I really do just love Taekwondo for Taekwondo. I think that gets lost sometimes in all of these goals and medals and performance incentives, and we have to be tactical and this and that. But in the end, I think we all have to just celebrate our love for this wonderful martial art. I'm grateful for everyone who came before. I try my hardest to learn about the history of Taekwondo and the history of the pioneers and the history of competition. And, I still geek out about competitors from the 80s and 90s. When I see their videos, I'm like, oh man, that was such a great fighter. And I even go back and try to research the origins of Poomsae and, going all the way back and try to understand that better too. So I think maybe if I would close by, encouraging other people to do the same, to understand where our sport comes from, particularly the younger competitors, and I think there's a lot of wonderful history there that maybe could be documented better.
Great, Master. It would be a pleasure maybe for another time to talk about history of Taekwondo and from the evolution of the martial art and the sport.
Definitely.
Great, Master. How can people contact you? What is your Dojang website?
Yes, my Dojang website is cwtkd.com, and they can email me at D as in Dan, and then my last name CHUANG at cwtkd.com. But really, reach out to me on Facebook, wherever you can find me. I'm pretty easy. I'm online a lot. If you ever have any questions about Taekwondo, Poomsae, sparring, whatever it is, collegiate Taekwondo, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Master. I will put on the show notes the links to you. And it's been a pleasure. I really, really enjoyed the talk. Thank you very much. And good luck with all your projects, Master.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.